Hello, everybody, and welcome to Survival Mode. I'm your host, Stephanie D. Sanders, and today I have a very, very special guest on the show. I mean, very, very special, y'all. Today we have my sister. She's my older sister, Lanita R. Price, and she's here today to shed some light on her life and her story and the moment in which she found herself in a mode of survival. Y'all, please welcome to the show today, Lanita R. Price. Hey, girl.
Hey, sweetie. Thank you, guys. Hey, how are you all?
Oh, thank you for coming on the show today. It's a wonderful show that I wanted to use as a bit of motivation for other people when you do find yourselves going through modes of survival. So we wanted you to come on and talk to us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get more into what happened to you when you found yourself in a mode of survival. But first and foremost, now see, I probably know some of this stuff, y'all, but I just wanted her to come on and be able to tell us who was Lanita. See, I almost said Sanders, but she was Sanders back then. Who was Lanita Sanders growing up? Who was she?
I was a young, tiny, vivacious young girl enjoying life. I love to be outdoors, riding my bike. I love spending time out in the sun, hanging out by the swimming pool, going to the roller skating rink with my friends, and just living a well-rounded life with my mom and my dad and my sister and my brother. I grew up in Florida, Lakeland, Florida at that, and I enjoyed the marching band when I got to junior high school.
Right.
I did marching band. I did a lot of color guard in junior high school. I did some track and field. I wasn't real good at it, but I did do some track and field. By the time I got to high school, I enjoyed the band once again. I spent a lot of time traveling with the band. I was in the color guard. I joined a community choir, and I hung out with a lot of the folks from the community choir, traveling around Central Florida, singing and just having a good time being with other people of like-minded faith and like-mindedness. I didn't have a lot of health challenges or issues as a young girl. I remember growing up, I did have a case of asthma early on, and it was what they would call childhood asthma. I had an episode with an allergic reaction that I had that actually caused some skin rashes that kind of broke out just along the neckline and along my upper torso. My mom took me out to a dermatologist, and they figured out that I was allergic to certain foods.
Yes, I
Yeah,
remember that.
it wasn't necessarily that I was just allergic to the environment. It was certain foods that I'd actually, they determined that I was allergic to. So my mom was very careful in making sure that those things were kept out of my diet so that I didn't have any issues with that. And then outside of that, I'm trying to remember if I had any other real health challenges. It wasn't until I think I got to senior high school when I started noticing that I had a cycle that was a lot heavier and longer than a lot of my friends. And by the time I graduated high school, I found out that I had fibroids on my ovaries.
See, and I didn't even know that. See, now that's a whole nother topic we're going to have to talk about.
Yeah.
I had, let me write that down, because we're going to talk about that. I didn't even know that, you know.
Yeah, I had fibroids on my ovaries, and I had fibroids on my uterus. And I married young. I married when I was 20 years old, and that's when things really became haywire with my uterus and with my ovaries. And I started to have not just a heavy menstrual cycle, but I actually started to experience a lot of abdominal pain. So every time it was time for me to have a cycle, I had the worst time with it. It was extremely unbearable. I spent a lot of time going back and forth to the ER, and all they could do was give me medication to kind of settle everything down. And then they would refer me back out to an OBGYN to kind of get checked out. And they kept saying, you're too young for any type of surgeries. Let's just try to monitor your diet, make sure that you're exercising and taking care of yourself. And things should settle down for you, or at least that's what we were hoping they would settle down for me.
See, I didn't know about those certain things that were going on with you from a female perspective, which I just wrote that down. So we will be talking about that on another show.
Okay.
So you can pretty much say that you were in a pretty healthy state as a young person. You had issues when it came to the female side of things, but overall it was pretty much, I won't say regular, it was pretty healthy for yourself. And I mean, you went on to get ready to go into the military. I remember that very vividly. And you were working to lose your weight. I mean, it was inspiring for me, and I was in everybody's sport that came along. You know, she was eating certain ways and exercising, and she wore this little plastic suit, y'all. She wore this little plastic suit.
Oh, you remember that? Yeah, I do.
You know, the one that everybody would wear, and then you find out that really all you're losing is water weight.
Yeah.
Okay, but she wore that, but she was so committed to losing that weight and getting her health and everything together so she could go into the Air Force. She actually did. You know, I mean, you on a really strenuous workout regimen, and you'd be out there working out in the hot sun around Rochelle Elementary School track. I was like, okay, yeah, you got me on that one, because I'm not going out there in that sun. See, that's why.
Well, it wasn't just that. It wasn't just Rochelle. I was getting up at 3:00 every morning so that I could go and run Lake Hollingsworth.
Oh, yeah.
And I didn't start out as a runner. In fact, I didn't like running. I enjoyed walking, but I did not like running. But I started getting up at 3:00 in the morning, and I was running. And I would run the lake, and then I'd come home, and I'd have a high-protein breakfast. I was drinking a lot of water, and I was just kind of monitoring what I was eating, because I really wanted to go into the military, and I needed to lose 27 pounds to go in. And so by the time I got ready to go to boot camp, I had lost almost 40 pounds.
Wow.
Just from the lifestyle change and the diet change to make sure that I was ready to go in. My goal was to meet the minimum, but it turned out that I exceeded even the minimum that I needed to go in.
Wow. So see, like, again, you had a pretty healthy childhood and teenage years. Even after that, you went into the military. And like I had jotted down even in my notes, you had your ups and downs, but you started off, you went into the military, you retired from the military, you saw your daughter graduate from high school, you got remarried and moved out west. Okay, things were flowing and moving right along for you and your husband and Mr. Nico, that's my boy. That was her dog at the time. Things were just flowing right along for you, and life was good. Life was good. It was moving along, and you had made that adjustment and change to move out west after you had gotten married. But there came this time, and I mean, no one saw this particular thing coming down the pipeline. And it had something to do with your health, and nobody in our entire immediate family had anything remotely close to what she's about to tell you that happened in her life. We'll be right back in just a moment to talk a little bit more with my sister, Lanita R. Price. She breaks it on down, and she had a major moment of survival.
I was so broke down, and no one around me could be found. So many problems.
Welcome back, everybody, to Survival Mode. I'm your host, Stephanie D. Sanders, and like I said before, we have a very special guest in the audience with us today. That's my sister. Hey, girl.
Hey!
She's on the sister I got, y'all. Hey. And so she is here to talk to us about her moment of survival. Her moment of survival. We just talked to her a moment ago about just growing up and how life was for her. And we found she pretty much had a healthy lifestyle, except for a couple of things here and there in which mom and her dad helped her to kind of get through at that time in her life. Went on into the military, saw her daughter graduate, got remarried, and moved on to start her life over again on the West Coast. All of this was going on. Things were going along well, but then the world kind of stopped. It was on pause for a moment. And I just wanted to know, what was that happened in your life that caused you to find yourself in a moment of survival?
Good question. I was diagnosed with stage 2, grade 3 breast cancer. And it was what they call ductal invasive carcinoma, which meant that it was also in my milk ducts. And I had no issues, as Stephanie said, prior to that would lend itself to say that I was a candidate for breast cancer. My family doesn't have a history of the BRCA gene. I was tested. I don't have a history of the BRCA gene. And I was getting my mammograms every year. The military had actually started me off on that cycle of making sure that I got them every year because it was a mandatory requirement for us. Mm-hmm. And then when I retired, that was one of the first things when I started going to the VA here, that they started checking. They were checking mammograms every year. They were doing the regular women's health visits, and they had noticed that I had a spot on my right breast. However, when I retired and started going to the VA, I had never had anything, so they didn't have anything to gauge it against. Mm-hmm. This spot just randomly showed up. And so what they said was, we will monitor it and we'll check it next year. And if it changes, then we will work from there. So when I retired in 2007, I moved to Arizona. I started getting my mammograms every year. And then it was 2011 when they saw a spot. And then in 2012, I had my mammogram that year. And now they had something to compare it against. Prior to that, from 2007 up to 11, I had nothing. Wow. So they checked this spot that I had, and they started with just the regular mammogram. Then they recommended that I have a diagnostic ultrasound. And then from the diagnostic ultrasound, the doctor said, okay, it's changed in shape and size from the previous year. I think we need to biopsy it. And when they biopsied, that's when they determined that I actually had breast cancer. They were able to give it a stage and a grade. And people would say, oh, stage 2, that's not that bad. But it was actually the grade that was associated with it. The grade meant that it was a fast-moving cancer. Mm-hmm. And so the doctor did the exam, and my results came back. And my OBGYN, she had her nurse call and asked me if I could come in to get the results from my mammogram. And at the time, I was working at a behavioral health site that was probably about 3 or 4 blocks from the VA. Mm-hmm. So I took some leave, and I went over and I met with the doctor. And it was unusual because I didn't have an appointment, but I'd had the exam. And they didn't want to give the results over the phone. The doctor wanted to see me. So when I went in to see her, and I'm sitting there in the chair, and she's got my paperwork, and she says, well, we got your results back from your biopsy. She said, what do you think it is? And I jokingly looked at her and I said, well, it can't be good if you call me in here. Mm-hmm. And she said, well, no. She said, no, she didn't say no. I apologize. She said, well, I don't ever like to give results, good or bad, over the phone. I prefer that everyone that has had a test that they come in. And
Now,
then
that
she
had to be
lays.
scary.
It was
That had to be scary,
weird
just
that she would say it
coming.
like that. It wasn't scary, but it was just weird how she said it. And so, so I said, okay, well, what are the results? And then that's when she had the papers there, and she just kind of put her hands on top of them, and she said, you have breast cancer. And she said they've determined that it's stage 2 and it's grade 3. She said, so they want to do surgery as soon as possible. They don't want to wait. They want to do surgery as soon as possible. So I'm sitting there and I'm thinking in my head, is she kidding me? Not me. I know she's not talking about me, right?
Right.
But I wasn't sad and I wasn't crying. I was just like, no, she must have the wrong results. That's what I'm thinking to myself. So then she asked me how I felt. She said, well, how do you feel? And I told her, I said, well, I don't really know what to feel right now. And she said, well, we have counselors here on site if you'd like to talk to someone. And at the time I told her, I said, you know what? I said, I've got people at my job that I can talk to, because I was working in behavioral health at the time. I said, I've got people at my job that I can talk to. I'd like to leave right now, and then let them contact me whenever they're ready to contact me. So she said, okay, well, they're going to contact you very soon. She said, because they feel that they need to go in as soon as possible and take care of this.
See, and I knew it was going to be good to have Lanita on, because we heard the story. We heard that it was cancer, but we didn't know some of these intricate details about the story. And so really and truly, it's like I'm hearing it for the first time with you guys, to be able to get the experience that she was having in being told that you had breast cancer. And I did have that down here because I wanted to know, what were you thinking when they said those words? And you were saying how, okay, let me just get away from here for the moment. Do you need counseling? Okay, let me just step away for a moment. I think that would probably be me too, before I get outside and have a moment with God in the car, trying to, figure it out or whatever. But you chose to go ahead and step away because you knew you had a support system already, intact. Now, some people may not have that type of a support system. So what would your encouragement be for them if something like this comes up and they find themselves almost alone? What would you suggest for someone in that instance as we continue hearing?
For me, the best thing that I found was having people around me that had faith.
Yeah.
Who had the hope and the belief that I was going to make it through it. So that I wasn't hoping and believing on my own, but I had other people that weren't in a death mode. Because normally when you get the diagnosis of cancer, let's be honest, 9 out of 10 people automatically see you as gone. They write you off. As soon as you get diagnosed with cancer, it doesn't care if it's breast cancer, ovarian cancer, uterine cancer, colon cancer, any type of cancer with the big C word, people automatically start to feel sorry for you and have pity for you. And I was so grateful for the people that I had around me, because I remember after I got the diagnosis and I left, I didn't want to call my husband first, because my husband is actually a widower, and his first wife, she had cancer. She had ovarian cancer, and they had been married almost 13 years when she died, when she passed away from it. And so for me to be his second wife and to get a diagnosis like this, I wasn't ready to tell him just yet. Wow. I was still processing it myself when I left. So the first phone call I made actually was to my mom. And this is where support actually comes in. Now, my mom, there are a lot of people that know my mom, and she is a sweetheart. But my mom, she can go to one extreme versus another extreme. And in a situation like this, cancer would have been one of those extremes where even though I called her first, I still would have thought that she might have had that, oh my gosh, my baby's going to die.
Mhm.
But you know what? My mom, when I called my mom, the first words out of her mouth after I told her about the diagnosis was, she said, all is well, sweetie. We're going to get through this. My mom said that.
Wow, wow, wow.
She said, all is well, and we're going to get through this, sweetie.
Mama is something else.
She is.
You
She
just
really
never
is.
know what you're gonna get. Mama's like a bag of, what is that? What's that from the movie? Like a bag of chocolates or something or something.
Oh, yeah. Life is like a box of chocolates.
Like a box of chocolates. Sometimes you never know what you're gonna get.
You don't.
Mom,
Mhm.
Mom. But it's
This was
always,
her day.
it always comes from a good place.
It
You
does.
just have to be ready. When you bite in that piece of chocolate, you got to be ready.
You got to be ready because you don't know.
This is a good moment for you sharing that with Mom, and then ultimately her sharing and so forth with me. You know, I had just left Arizona and moved back to Atlanta
Yeah,
for
you
a
did.
while, and as a matter of fact, I think I had just moved back to Florida too during that time. So I was like, "Duh, was I supposed to leave? You know, was I supposed to be there? You know, to help her through that time in her life and just stay there?" And I was so focused on the career thing and then getting back to Atlanta and getting back closer to Mom. I was gone. You know, so that was a trick for me. Is like, okay, do I need to go back? You know, like that. But I didn't. I
Mhm.
didn't. And Lanita started to take things on herself with her family and her husband and her church members and the co-workers. But did you automatically find a strength within yourself to say, you know what, I'm about to go in. I'm about to go in on this thing and I'm going to tackle it, you know, myself? Or did you have to kind of step back and regroup before that level of strength came for you to say, it's fight time? This is the main.
Well, there were a couple of things that led up to it. After, let me see, I'm trying to remember now because it's been such a long time now for me. I was actually diagnosed in 2012, and I've been cancer-free since 2012 after having to go through all my treatments and everything in 13 and 14. But I remember when they first told me that I had the breast cancer. Prior to that, it couldn't have been more than a month prior that I had been getting up in the evenings, early mornings, and I was doing a lot of praying and worshiping on my own. And one of the early morning sessions, I was out in my living room and I'm praying and I'm worshiping. And then all of a sudden I started remembering different things in my life that I had gone through, that God had actually seen me through.
Mm-hmm.
And I had not been diagnosed yet. You got to remember that.
Mm-hmm.
I had not been diagnosed yet. But I was in a prayer and worship session, and I was remembering how in 1990 I had been through a car accident, which should have killed me.
Oof.
If anyone had seen the car that my daughter and my husband at the time had been in, we were in a car that flipped end over end, and the witnesses said it did it 3 times.
That was bad.
And I had destruction internally that had to be repaired, as well as externally. But I was remembering that. I was remembering having a C-section with my daughter and how I had a really complicated pregnancy.
Right.
And so these things came up during the prayer session. And so I'm just rejoicing and thanking God for all of this stuff that he had not done to me, but allowed me to go through and make it out on the other side of it. And also, before I got the actual diagnosis, I had all of the tests and everything run. And get this, the Sunday, before that Monday when I got the diagnosis, I'd been in a session at church, and we had a guest pastor that came in. And I wasn't concerned about the test results from any of the mammogram, the biopsy, none of that, because I'd had, like I said, I'd had something the year before and it was just a spot. So I wasn't worried. I was like, oh, it's just going to be the same old thing, same old spot.
Mm-hmm.
So we had this guest pastor that came in, and at the end of his service, he asked every single person in the house to come down to the altar, and he prayed over each person. And when he got to me, he just put his hands like on my shoulders. And he said, you feel that? He said, the Lord is telling you to rest in him. He didn't know that I'd had a mammogram. He didn't know I'd had a biopsy. I didn't have any results yet from all of these exams and everything. But it was kind of like a way God was confirming before the diagnosis that I was going to be okay.
Mm-hmm. 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 Wow.
And then even after getting the diagnosis, I was a part of a praise and worship team. And the young guy at the time, his name was Jesse, he was over the praise and worship team. And we were having rehearsal, and everybody was just singing their own worship song to the Lord. And we were unable to actually rehearse that night. And I just remember that I got down on my knees, and I'm worshiping and I'm praising God. And then I audibly hear in my head, you've got to go through the fire to know that I am in it with you.
Wow.
Now, you know, some people say, is that God talking or was that you talking?
Right.
Well, I was too busy crying and worshiping. So,
is
you know.
that me talking to myself?
Right. Is that me telling myself, you know, trying to be super deep or something,
yes.
You know?
Mm-hmm.
But I took it as the Lord at least giving a confirmation that, you know, I didn't bring this about. It's just a natural progression in life because we're in a fallen world and in a fallen state. That yeah, things happen.
Yeah. Wow.
So those were things that allowed me to just stand actually on my faith as I was going through this process. God put people around me who had actually been through cancer,
mm-hmm.
who were able to also tell me all is well and we'll get through this.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was really great to have people that were able to hold me up in prayer, people that were able to hold my husband up in prayer.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember that same day after I got the diagnosis, and I called my mom first. I called you second.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't think I told you that, but I called you second.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, sometimes you can go off the deep end as well, but you didn't. You were in a place of faith that day. When I
you, hold on. She put a little extra emphasis on that day. Yes, I can get a little emotional now. But it's okay. Especially if it's with family. You know, I just have a heart like that for things and people and situations. So I do. I know. I know. I know. I have to go over here and come back.
But that day was your day because you were the second cheerleader that let me know that it was going to be okay.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And the crazy part about it is our daughter had just been out here to visit us right before I got the diagnosis, and she was pregnant with our first grandchild at the time. So I didn't call her first or second.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't call my husband first or second because I needed to build up before I could get to them, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't afraid when I got the diagnosis, and I have to be honest about that. I wasn't afraid, and I know it was because of the time that I had spent in prayer that month prior, and I had remembered all the things that God had brought me through before, that I could remember that he was still going to bring me through this. Even without me having to coach myself, it was just somewhere on the inside of me. And then to have this pastor come in, doesn't know me. He didn't know me.
Right.
He didn't know that I had had an exam. He knew nothing. And for him, as he calls everybody down to tell me that to just rest in the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew that everything was going to be okay, but I just had to get up the courage to be able to call. Because how do you call your husband and tell him, look, you went through cancer with one wife, and guess what? You got to go through this again.
Wow. That's
yes, you got to go through this again. Guess what? So after I called you and I talked with you, then I called Vaughn. Now, I was still in the parking lot of the VA. It took me that long from walking from the doctor's office and calling you, Mom, and then Vaughn before I even made it to my car.
Wow.
So I called him and I told him, and he told me, he said, all is well, sweetie. We'll get through this. And I told him, I said, you're absolutely right. So I got off the phone with him and I went back to my job and I sat in my supervisor, Victoria's office. And Victoria's got to be at least 6 years younger than I am at the time. And she let me sit on her couch and she just allowed me to just talk about what had just taken place.
Mm-hmm.
And then she asked me, she said, do you want to go home, or she said, you want to stay here at work or do you want to go home? And I looked at her and I told her, I said, no. I said, if I go home, I'm just going to sit in my house and cry. I'd rather stay here and work.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that I was trying to be hyper spiritual or trying to be a superwoman. I just knew me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I knew if I went home right then, I was going to be in my head and I was probably going to be thinking about it a lot more than I really needed to think about it.
Yeah.
So there were people at this behavioral health site that needed me at that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And then when my turn came for me to go through treatment, then I knew that God would send people to be there for me.
Wow. Wow.
I knew he'd send those folks for me. So I stayed at work that day. I stayed on the job. And then when I got home that evening, I was laying there in the bed when my husband came in. I wasn't crying. I was just laying there because it was still, this is like a weighted jacket dropped on your chest, and you're trying to pull yourself up from it. So he comes in and he's talking with me. And as he's talking with me, I asked him, I said, well, how do you feel? And he told me, he said, well, when you called me earlier and told me about it, he said, at the time when I told you all was well, he said, I meant that. He said, but then when I got off the phone with you, he said, everything just dropped. He said, it just fell on me. He said, and I had to get up and I had to go outside. He said, and I walked around and he said, I'm looking up at the sky and he's like, no, Lord, you can't take her. No, she can't go anywhere, and he's praying and he's talking to God about me. And so this is choking me up, listening to him, tell me about how he felt. So then he asked me how I felt. And at that moment, all of that strong, super spiritual woman that was there before, I looked at him and I told him, I said, give me tonight to cry, and then tomorrow I'll fight. I hadn't thought of those words. They just popped up. They just came up.
That's a t-shirt. We're going to get a t-shirt.
Okay,
Don't taking that idea. That's a t-shirt we're going to get.
That's our t-shirt, right? Because those were my words. Yeah. So I told him, I said, give me tonight, give me tonight to cry, and tomorrow I will. And I meant that. And he said, okay. And he didn't cry. He just kind of rubbed my leg, and then he walked out and he went in the living room, and I stayed there on the bed and I did cry. I didn't sob uncontrollably. I cried, but I did cry.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And then when I got done crying, I told her,
we're going to come back in just a minute.
Okay.
We got another segment. We got another segment for this show right here, because I don't know what to expect with the interview. I knew I needed to know what went on. She's going to come back in just a moment and tell us a little bit more about what happened thereafter during the treatment. And like she said, she beat it, y'all. We'll be right back.
Coming left and right, I wonder how could I win this fight? So I called the Father up late one night. I told him how.
Everybody, we are back for the third segment of this particular show with my sister, Lanita Price, and she is telling us about her moment of survival. This particular segment, we wanted to go straight into after she got the cancer notification, and then she started to go through treatment. Once you started the treatment, what were some of the things that you actually noticed changed in your life from a physical, mental, and a spiritual standpoint?
Well, I found, first of all, with my spiritual side of it, that my faith grew even stronger.
Mm.
And oddly enough, I spent a lot of time mentoring and counseling and ministering to other people with issues while I've got an issue of my own that I am working through.
Right, right.
And I'm not just talking about the people from the behavioral health clinic that I was working at. I'm talking about friends and family members who would call and they check on me, but then all of a sudden in the middle of checking on me, there's something that I'm checking on them about. And and I found several of them, they'd say, girl, I don't understand how you're going through something and you're here helping me go through something. How selfish of me to ask for your help or even expect you to pick up on me needing help. So I found my faith growing a lot during that time because I had to rest a lot on God. And then in my resting on Him, He was then strengthening me by using me to minister and mentor others. Health-wise, it was a lot of challenges going through this treatment, a lot of challenges. And it's not just so much the physical deformity, because when you go through cancer, breast cancer especially, there's always tissue that's removed. In my case, it wasn't just the tumor that was removed. I had to make a decision after the tumor was removed whether or not I wanted them to go back in and remove additional tissue or just take my breast. And the reason for that is because when they go in and they do the biopsy, they take the tissue, the tumor, and then they'll take a margin of tissue around the tumor that's about the size of the tumor. And then what they look for is what they call clear margins. So when they took the tumor and they took the excess tissue, my margins weren't clear. So I had the option of them going back in and doing what they had done the first time, which was a lumpectomy, taking the lump, or I had the option of them taking the breast. So by the time I got diagnosed, I was reading books, I was looking at YouTube videos, I was talking to friends and family members who had gone through cancer treatments. I was doing every kind of research that I could do to find out what were the best options for me. So I made the decision to have them take the breast. So I was diagnosed in November of 2012. I had a lumpectomy. The margins weren't clear. 28 days later, I was back in surgery, and this time I had them take the breast. Now, the only difference was I asked the doctor if he could spare some of the skin. I knew that he was going to take the fatty tissue, the ducts, he was taking all of that, but if he could just spare some of that outside skin for reconstruction later, that's what I asked him to do.
Yeah, and having worked with a plastic surgeon in surgical tech for a while, yeah, you definitely want that extra skin to be able to go back in there to put any type of an implant, because you can't just stretch your regular skin like that. I mean, you can probably to an extent, but not on the level of you having an actual breast replaced to the size of the other breast, depending upon that size. So yeah, that was a good thing for you to do. And I see that you dealt with the physical, you dealt with the spiritual, the mental. You dealt with that because you watching YouTube, you listen to your sermons, you doing your own self-help kind of thing, which is really, really important, because at those times you have a lot of time by yourself, when somebody's going to work or whatnot. So you have to find those times to be able to continue to encourage yourself and motivate yourself like you did, and that's a wonderful, wonderful thing. Now, during this time when you were going through all of this, did you find that it was better for you to have a smaller or a larger group of people for your support system? What was most helpful for you?
You know what? A smaller group was helpful to me, and that's exactly what I had. I had a small core group of people that came and surrounded me. At the time, my pastor's wife was working, well, she does still work at a cancer site here in town. So she was an excellent resource when it came to telling me which doctors were actually fellows at the VA, and who to ask for And then one of the pastors at our church, she had gone through breast cancer, so she was a great support to me. In fact, the two of them came to my first chemo treatment,
Wow.
and they sat with me through the process. And the people that I had around me were people that I said had the faith and no fear.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't want people around me that had pity for me, because, you know, when you get the C word, everybody's got pity. Everybody wants to be in your inner circle then, because if you die, then they get to say, oh, you know what? I was there. I was bringing her hot meals.
Wow.
I was there for her. We were calling each other. We were talking,
Wow.
you know.
Wow.
So it was great not to have all of that external, all of those larger number of visitors who were just here as looky-loos.
Yes.
You know, and there were a few that still got in, you know, that slipped in under the radar, but you could tell when they came for their visit that they weren't just here to check on me. They were here to see what I looked like. You know, what does it look like?
What do you look like? What does the place look like? How you living? How you do? You know, how's
Does she have any hair? You know, but the people that were around me were for my core group. I had, and they weren't all Christian.
Mm-hmm.
Not everyone was a Christian that was around me.
Mm-hmm.
I had one dear friend, Amanda. She's a couple of years younger than I am. And when I got the diagnosis and I was talking with her about it, she's like, oh, Miss Price, you're going to make me start praying again. Because she used to call me Miss Price.
Mm-hmm.
She said, oh, Miss Price, you're going to make me start praying again. And I said, okay, Amanda, if that's what it takes, then that's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
But she and her daughter made it a point. Every single week, they took me out. One day out of that week, got me out of the house and took me to do something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that was so wonderful, whether it was just ice cream or it was pizza, or if we were just going up to one of the outlet malls to walk around and snap pictures and sit and laugh and talk.
Mm-hmm.
It was such a relief to not be looked at as somebody that was sick. Even though I was bald head, I was a lot thinner.
Mm-hmm.
It was great to be around, you know, people that didn't see me as sick, but saw me as thriving and going to live.
Right. See, that's very, very important to one, have that type of support system, and then, you know, have some genuine friends like that, you know, who are there for you during those times, the good and the bad times. You know, I had always said I think it was several years ago when I actually said it. You can really tell the genuineness of your friendships. I tell you what, you move away, get sick, go in the hospital, get divorced, any of those types of things like that can immediately let you know the genuineness of some of the relationships you have.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
Just having that person like that, or to call you and say, okay, let's go out. You know, or you sit in the hospital and you got your department comes in the next day after you have surgery to check on you and see, you know, what's going on. Or your girlfriend comes in the day after that. And she gets up to walk down the hallway with you, and she's a picture taker, and then she's taking your pictures too. So, I mean, it's those types of things that really make the difference in those people that are in your lives, and then the process that you're actually going through. But it helps you in a lot of different ways. It helps you with the friendships. It helps you with the healing. It helps you with the motivation to go through whatever you're getting ready to go through. So I'm just grateful that you actually had some people like that in your life. And, you know, we were over here praying and going.
I do know, yes. And you know what? It was great. It was great when you and Mama took that trip out here and you flew out to see me.
Well,
and Mama's standing out there and she tells me, she said, I just needed to put eyes on you. She knows that I have a great husband, a wonderful husband. Vaughn is fantastic. And she knows that he was taking great care of me. But for her to say, I just needed to put eyes on you. And I thought that was one of the sweetest things.
Yeah, that was great. That was a great time to come out and bond and everything. I remember a picture we took. Matter of fact, I think I had it on the wall. And it was 3 of us. Like, you didn't have no hair. Right? None. And then it was funny because the way I had my hair, it was almost like I didn't have hair. I was like, oh, we were supporting her for real. You know, we had on our little outfits and the shades and everything. And it was just a cute little bonding moment. And plus, it got Mama out because she hadn't flown in nobody's airplane before.
Right.
9/11.
Right.
That's how long
Right.
it was in, and she was not going to be going if I didn't go. So that was a really good time for us. But now, in your particular case, how many months did it actually take you to go through the treatment and before you got to that final stage of things?
Oh goodness, it took several years.
Oh wow.
So I started in November of 12, and that was just with the lumpectomy, and then in December of 12, the mastectomy, and then all of 2013 I spent in the radical part of treatment. So the first half of 13 I spent in chemo. So I was taking the 3 chemo drugs that they give you, and then after the first 6 months with the chemo, I took radiation. And I did that until about September. So it was around the end of September when I finished chemo and radiation. I'd lost hair, all of my hair. I'd actually lost, my tissue had burned from the radiation. I did great the first few treatments, and then my tissue started to break down because of how aggressive the treatment was. And then after that next year, 2014, 2015, 2016, I spent in reconstructive therapy, trying to be reconstructed to what you would consider normal, or what I needed to look like to be normal.
Yes, what it was acceptable for you to be able
Right. But then it turns out that I didn't need any of that. I could have just, if I had done even more research, I believe I wouldn't have even gotten reconstructed. If I had made the choice to just have them both taken at the same time.
Oh, yes.
Which some women do.
Some people do. Yes.
Right. But I didn't think that part through at the time. I was like, no, I want to be repaired. I want to be fixed. So because of the aggressive treatment, the aggressive radiation, that's why it took so long to get reconstructed. Because every time that let me go back. The first half of that, I was getting, I had an implant inside, and it was called a tissue expander. And so every week I was having fluid injected into that expander to make it stretch so that my wall would stretch to accommodate some type of a prosthetic breast. That was painful, extremely painful. It was horrible pain. That was pretty tough. And then after we finally got to a place where I could have something small and conservative, it wasn't even big, it was small and conservative. We started the reconstructive process, and they would go in and they would put an implant in. My tissue would break open. They'd have to go back in, take it out, give me an opportunity to heal, and then go back, retry it again. And it wasn't until the very last time that we did it, and the doctor put in that last implant, and it broke open, just like every last one before. But this one broke open the day after surgery. The others, they gave me an opportunity to have a little time before they broke open. The very last one, when it broke open, he said, we're just going to leave your tissue open. He said, we're not going to try to let it heal closed. So he put a couple of anchor sutures in there for me. And he went on vacation, and he left me with this gaping hole in my chest and some ointment to put on it and some gauze bandages to put over it. And he went on vacation.
He just said wound care.
Yes. And I had to have one of my regular visits, and it was with his nurse practitioner. And I was in visiting with her, and she's looking at it, and it still looks a hot mess. And she said, you know what we're going to do? She said, if you can tolerate the air on it, she said, what I want you to do is to just put some cloth, a cotton top over you, no more ointment. You've got your sutures. I mean, I had like 3 sutures just to keep it from just ripping away.
Open,
And as soon as I did what she told me to do, it was so miraculous. God is so miraculous. My tissue began to turn white on one end, the end that was closest to itself. And as that tissue turned white, it began to touch itself. and it just moved along until it was like a zipper.
And it just sealed
And it
itself
zipped
up.
itself closed.
Yeah, yeah. Because see, the ointment won't allow it to do that.
Right. It
Anything
wasn't
like that,
allowing
it
it
won't
to do it.
allow it to do that. It's kind of like when you have injuries and scars and scratches and stuff, you know, as a kid or whatever. You know, normally you might put something on that first day or whatever, but
Right.
you want to keep it clean, keep it dry, and let the air get it.
Yes.
You know, to allow it to heal and start closing up itself and bonding back together. So,
yeah.
Wow. So what did you actually notice as we get ready to wrap things up? What did you notice was a positive sign for you that I feel like I'm in the clear? I feel like I'm in the clear.
That is a very good question. I never thought about that. I never thought about, oh, I'm in the clear. I just knew that every time I went in for a visit with the oncologist and they did their blood work and they did their lab test and they come back and they said, you're still clear. You're still clear. So I never just thought about it. I trusted the process. And when I was done with, and I won't say when I was done with the reconstructive part of it, when I was done with the radiation and the chemo, I considered everything in the rearview mirror for me. But they say that they used to say you needed 5 years clear before they would consider you as clear. But now they've gone back and realized that they don't deem you clear until 10 years now.
Oh, wow. Okay. And how did you feel when they told you you're cancer free, we don't see it anymore, you're good?
Oh, I think I was always like, oh, I already know. You know, I guess I think oh yeah, I know. I don't expect you guys to see anything. I don't expect you to see anything.
Is this my last visit? I'm out of here. Bye. Gotta go. Thank you so much. You know, it's like,
right, yeah.
I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm over this. I'm done, ready to go on. Well, I know it's been a longer than we thought interview, but I'm really glad because I got an opportunity to hear some things I hadn't heard myself, and this is my sister-in-law.
Right.
So, you know, we all have moments similar to this, or we know somebody who does. So it's just a time to encourage one another to know that, hey, if they can make it through,
absolutely,
got a chance too. You know, but it starts up there. You know, and you have to figure that out for yourself. How are you going to handle it? It's not to say that you're perfect enough to get through anything or whatever, but like she said, having that support system, having a mindset to want to do better and get better for yourself is really important too. And Lanita, what would you like to say to the people out there as your moment of encouragement, your wise word, or whatever, for anybody out there who may be even in the midst of something like that or find themselves at a later point in mode of survival?
You are your own best advocate. It doesn't have to be cancer. It can be diabetes. It can be high blood pressure. It can be gout. You are your own best advocate. So I encourage everyone to take the time to read, to study, to ask questions. Don't just take the word of your medical provider and run with it. There are a lot of holistic things that you can do. There were things that I learned that sugar was something that we should all be avoiding as much as we can, because sugar feeds cancer cells. And everyone fails to realize that every single person has cancer cells within their body. It's just a matter of whether or not they're fed the things that will cause them to turn into something that is an actual issue in your body. So being your own best advocate, and I found that the doctors they didn't look down on me. They loved the fact that I was a reader and that I had questions and that there were things that I knew coming in, because immediately when I told the surgeon, the general surgeon that was going to do the mastectomy, and I asked him, I said, can you spare some of my tissue? In my meeting with him, he said, oh, you're a reader. And it was so cute the way he said it. He said, oh, you're a reader. And I was like, yes. He's like, absolutely. He said, I love that. He said, I prefer having patients that, you know, are their own best advocate.
Right.
So that I would encourage.
Start coming in and bring your questions. They already know. Okay, here comes Sanders.
Yeah.
Okay, what questions you got? I mean, I used to have the doctor come in right at the beginning of the appointment. Okay, what questions you got for me today?
Yeah.
Before we get even
But it's your
started.
body. You have a right. It's your body. You have a right.
Right. Well, Lanita, we want to thank you so much for being on the show today and sharing your story with us.
You're welcome.
We want to thank all of you guys out there for watching. Hey, Lanita, do you happen to have an email address? Or really, if you want to, you can reach out to her, on Facebook or Instagram if you'd like to have her to speak and or talk to your audiences or your shows or podcasts. She's like a wealth of knowledge in this particular area. So definitely, Lanita, where can they reach you on social media or something like that to get in contact?
I'm on Facebook. It's Lanita Price. It's all lowercase on Facebook. And on Instagram, I think I'm still Beautiful Soul Jewel. I'm either Beautiful Soul Jewel or Favored Grace.
Okay, I think I'm under Favored Grace.
I think I'm under Favored Grace, yes. So Favored Grace on Instagram. And then you can reach me at my email. It's Lanita, Lanita R Price @gmail.
Okay. All right. So there you have it. Reach out to her if you would like for her to be a speaker for your events. Have her on as a guest on your television or radio or podcast. And again, thank you so much for watching Survival Mode. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, definitely contact us at walkinthoughtproductions@gmail.com. I am Stephanie D. Sanders. And if you'd like to have me as a guest on one of your shows, you can also reach out to me at the same email. Thank you so much for watching, everybody, and we'll see you the next time. This is Survival Mode.
Don't give up.